How do you make the perfect short crust pastry every time, and one that can be used for sweet or savory dishes? Stay tuned.
Hey guys, thanks for joining us. If this is your first time tuning in, let us know you're out there by giving us a big thumbs up below, and then hit that subscribe button to make sure you never miss a video. Now, let's start cooking. So I have two go-to crusts that I use. One is for tarts and the other is for pies. So the pastry crust that I use for tarts has the following ingredients, and they're all the same basic ingredients, except there's no egg in the one that I use for pies. So in this one, for tarts, I've got 220 grams of flour, all-purpose flour. I've got 110 grams of butter. And you can also use a combination of lard. You can use 55 grams of lard, 55 grams of butter. But for simplification, we're just going to use all butter in this case. And just a reminder, I'll have all of the ingredients listed in the description below with conversions to pounds and such. But it is important that your ingredients are weighed and not measured. Depending on, because you're going to get a different amount of flour in a cup from one day to the next, depending on humidity, depending on lots of different things. And so it's really best to weigh those ingredients so that they're always the same, very consistent. So again, we've got 220 grams of flour, 110 grams of butter, and I've got one egg that I'll whisk slightly, and then we've got some ice cold water. And now the key to, a lot of times people wonder about what the key is to making your crust as flaky as can be. Well, the key is that all your ingredients are cold. My butter has been in the freezer up until about 15 minutes ago. So it's been taken out of the freezer and sat here for about the last 15 minutes. So it's not frozen, but it's still very, very cold. And today I'm actually going to be doing this crust by hand. I like doing when I'm doing a single pie crust or pastry crust or tart crust, it's just easier to do it by hand. So I'm using a pastry cutter, which has also been in the refrigerator along with my flour. So my flour and the pastry cutter has been in the fridge, butter has been in the freezer, and I've got some water here that I've got 1 cube of ice in just to keep it ice cold. And this is just extra flour to flour our board with. So the first thing that I like to do is we're going to go ahead and put our butter in to our flour. And now with the pastry cutter, and of course you can certainly do this in a robo or a food processor if you'd like, and a lot of people do that. But I like doing it by hand just because I just like doing it by hand, kind of the same way with bread. I enjoy doing bread by hand, although the older I get, the harder that is. So we're just going to mix this, and we're just crushing it. Basically the same thing as pulsing it in your food processor. We are getting it to the consistency of sand. So that's what you're looking for, is to get these cubes broken down and mixed into the flour until they have the same consistency as sand on the beach. So we'll do this, and it usually takes, 2 or 3 minutes to get this part done. Okay, I think we are about there. And again, I'm not going for a fine sand, I'm going for kind of a gritty sand. And I don't know if you can see what I've got there. See that texture? Very dry texture. Okay. So once we get to that point, what we'll do, and it's always great to have a bench scraper with you in order to keep your bench cleaned. So what we'll do now is I'm going to go ahead and mix in my egg. So we'll just whisk this egg a little bit. And again, the difference between this crust that we're making today and the flakier pie crust is that we're using the egg, and the egg is kind of a binding agent. And just for tarts, I like for it, it's still going to be flaky, but it's just going to have a little bit more stability for just the bottom crust. So, you know, and you could do this for the bottom. If you're making a pie and you want to do a stable crust on the bottom, you could do this for the bottom, and you could do the more flaky crust for the top. And again, the difference is that the flakier crust does not have the egg in it. Still has the butter, but not the egg. So I probably could have chosen a larger bowl for this. But now what we're trying to do is just get the egg all mixed in. And in a second, I'll be using my hands, because that's the way you can feel and tell where you are. So, yep, at this point I want to use my hands. And, you know, we're going to have pieces of butter that we want to just mash. We want to mash those pieces of butter, and this is actually what gives your crust the flake. Is that butter? You don't mind leaving those larger pieces of butter in there, so that when they're in the oven, it's the moisture in those pieces that are coming out, and that's what causes the flake on your crust. And we're just trying to make sure we don't have any large pieces of butter still in there. Tell you what, let's switch to a bigger bowl. All right, I switched to a little bit bigger bowl. It just makes it a little bit easier. Okay, so now this is the texture that we're getting. That's with the egg. And what we're going to be looking for is how this crust comes together. And so it's coming together, but it's still very, very crumbly. So that's where the water comes in. And by the way, I didn't put any sugar in this mix because typically, if you're making a pie, you don't really need the extra sugar in the crust. So, all right, so I've got this cold ice water here, and we're just putting it in very little by little. Don't pour the whole lot in. So, and what we're looking for is for this dough to start coming together, but still be, you know, this is still going to be flaky. So that's still a little bit crumbly. So we'll go back in with just a little bit more ice water. And this is one of those things that is just, you know, as you do this, you'll get, as you have the experience, you will get to the point where you know the point at which you need to stop adding water. And, you know, so sometimes it's a little bit of trial and error, because every flour is not the same. Every level of humidity is not the same in every kitchen. So this is what we want. You see how that's sticking together? So now, put that aside, and I'm just going to knead this for just a second. And it doesn't need to be kneaded a whole lot, but that's really about it. And so we'll just put all of our pieces together here. Yep, there we go. We'll make a little disc, and we'll put our disc in the refrigerator for at least 30 minutes. And what that does is it just helps it to calm down, and you'll be able to roll it out. So there we have it. That's our pie crust, and it's now going to go in the refrigerator for about 30 minutes to rest. Our pastry dough has been in the refrigerator for about 30 minutes, and it's all rested. Just nice pillow there. So we are ready to roll it out. And just a couple of additional elements I have are, I've got a couple of egg yolks here that we will use to brush our crust with. We're going to roll this crust out. We'll mold it into our tart pan, and then we're going to blind bake it in the oven. That means we're going to put it in the oven. We're going to cover it with some parchment paper and put some beans or pastry beans or something in there to weigh it down to partially cook our crust. That's what blind baking means. So we're going to cook it for about 20 minutes in the oven just to get it set and to get some nice color on it. And then we'll take it out. We'll do an egg wash on that crust. and that will just prevent any liquid from flowing through the crust. And then we'll fill it with our tart ingredients.
Hey everybody, it's Walter from Artistic Gourmet Adventures. My wife Kim and I own this unique small group tour company where we host groups of 6 to 12 guests for one-week luxury adventures in beautiful locations throughout Europe and the United States. I have the privilege of being the adventure chef, creating and preparing daily gourmet meals for our guests. So, in this video series, from our cozy home kitchen here in the beautiful Loire Valley of France, we will demonstrate a wide variety of recipes, from culinary classics to originals, as well as covering professional kitchen techniques for the home chef. For more information on Artistic Gourmet Adventures, check our website, linked in the description below.
Okay, this is one of my favorite parts about cooking. I'm not really a baker, but when I bake, I enjoy making pie crusts, and enjoy making tart crusts. And so the point at which you're ready to roll out your crust is just a very exciting time. So we've got our crust ready to go, and now I've got some baking beans here, because what we're going to do is once we roll our crust out, then we're going to put it in our tart pan, and then we're going to blind bake it. But in order to do that, we need to cover that crust with some parchment paper, and we'll put some baking beans inside. So to do that, we're going to take some parchment paper, and you need a piece of parchment paper that's as big as the diameter of the bowl is. And I'm just going to show you a little trick, just a little trick for making your circle cutout. So that's as big as the bowl is, and it doesn't matter that it's bigger. So we're now we're just going to fold this in half, just like that, and we'll fold it in half again. And now where that point comes to, point that away from you, and now we're just going to make little, it's almost like making paper airplanes. Remember when you made paper airplanes in school? It's kind of like doing that. And we're just going to fold this to a point. And when we get that folded, what we're going to do is put this in the very center of our bowl. And you can use this. This is basically a cartouche that you might use when you're doing savory cooking to put over some food in a saute pan or something. But we put our point in the very center, and where we want to cut our tart paper is going to be, or our baking paper is going to be about here, because we want it to come up the sides of our pan. So then we just snip it off right there, and when you open it up, you'll have a perfect circle, and it fits our pan perfectly, just like that. All right, so we're going to roll our pan out, or roll our pastry out, and then we'll blind bake it. So to do that, let's start with a little flour on our table. So just like that. And that's great. And I always like to put a little bit in my hands and rub my rolling pin with it as well. Okay, so we've got our dough out, nice and firm, and let's just spray it with a little bit of our flour. And I always like to put a little bit on my rolling pin as well. So first thing I like to do is just take it and gently but firmly just pound it out a little bit so it's more malleable. Okay. All right, so that's where we want it, and yeah, it feels really, really nice. So I'm just going to start rolling it out, and you don't have to press too hard, just I guess medium pressure. I like to roll and then do a quarter turn and continue doing that all around. And then every once in a while I like to flip it over. There we go. Okay. Beautiful. And this is the point at which I can usually tell if I've done a pretty good job of the moisture level in the dough. When it's, if it's not cracking around the edges, then that's a good sign. If your dough starts cracking around the edges, that means it's probably just a little bit too dry. And you could put it back in a ball and use moist hands to kind of knead it a little bit, and then put it back in the fridge for 15 or 20 minutes, because that's probably what it's going to need in order to be able to be rolled out again. And I'm getting this to about between 3 and 5 millimeters, about an 1/8 of an inch thick, something like that. And now I'm just trying to see the width of this with my pan. I'm going to go a little bit more than that because it needs to come up the sides of the pan a little bit. So I'm just going to come out just a little bit. That's just great. And what I like to do at this point is I'll just roll the dough up on my rolling pin like this, gently, and we'll bring our tart pan over. And now there's no reason to put any butter or anything like that in the tart. The crust, believe me, has plenty of butter in it. So we'll just start from one side and just fold it over the tart just like that. And now what we'll do is we'll just use our fingers to make sure it's firmly in the corners. Perfect. Okay, that's good. That's what we want, just like that. And then we can just pull it along the sides as well. Okay, and now I'm just going to take my scissors and go around the edge and trim. Again, leaving a little bit of overhang. And I'll show you what we're going to do with that overhang. Just like that. Okay, very nice. So now what we'll do with the overhang is we're just going to bring it in just like this into the crust, into itself. And we'll just go around the edge. I went a little bit short there. We can always add to it a little bit if we need to. No one will ever know the difference. We just press it in. And now, since we are actually making a tart instead of a pie, we're actually just going to crimp the edges. And I'll show you how we get that started. So just come right along the edge here, if you can see that. And we're using this little crimping tool, and we're just pinching just a little bit. Just squeeze it, and then lift it up. And this is just one of many different treatments that you could do for your tart. And we'll just do this all the way around the pan. Okay, all right, and there we have it. We've got our crimped edge all the way around. And of course, like I said, you could do this with a fork, you could do it with whatever you wanted to do, just like you do with when you're making a pie. And now what we'll do is I'm just going to put some holes with my fork in the bottom of the crust, like that. Just give it some air holes so it can breathe. And we've got our parchment paper that we'll put down and our baking beans. And again, we've got our oven preheated to about 180 degrees Fahrenheit, or 180 degrees centigrade, 350 Fahrenheit. So we're going to put this in and let that crust blind bake for just about 20 minutes. Okay, our crust has been in the oven for about 20 minutes now. So we have basically blind baked it. And what that means is that we just put the pastry in the oven without anything in it to kind of get it started on the baking. And we've used these. I've got ceramic baking beans here. You could use, you know, dry pinto beans, whatever dry beans you have. You could use chickpeas, whatever you can find that will weigh it down, and just put that in there as well. So we're just going to take our beans out, and you can just buy ceramic beans at your, you know, nearest pastry shop, Bed Bath & Beyond, Amazon, that kind of thing. But those are wonderful to have. And now you can see our crust. It's just beautiful. It's nice and well formed. And what we'll do now is we are going to, because we are going to be putting a tart mixture in this crust, we are just going to do an egg wash over this. That'll keep any liquid from seeping through, and also just give us some beautiful color, because we'll do it on the edge as well. Very nice. Just like that. Okay, and now we'll just put it in for 2 or 3 minutes to let that harden, cook on a little bit and harden, and then we'll be ready to fill it with our tart. Our egg wash is cooked on, is baked on a little bit, so we are now ready to fill this tart.
If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more, give us a thumbs up below and hit that subscribe button. It's free. And ring the bell if you want to be notified as soon as we release a new video. Also, let us know in the comments if you have any special recipe requests. We really appreciate you tuning in. See you next time.